You're listening to Lunch with the Finance Bunch, bringing money talk you can understand. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Lunch with the Finance Bunch. I'm your host, Miss Charline, and I have my co-host over there, DJ Vander. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing great, Charlie. Nice to be back with you.
I know, it's been a couple of weeks.
It's been a couple of weeks, but you know, I think we're ready to go over here.
I
for
think
sure.
so, too. I was looking forward to the guest that we're going to have today. He is an amazing young man, and he's in the fashion industry.
That's right.
And everyone wants to know, how can I get into the fashion industry, right?
Always.
They either want to design, be a merchandiser, a retailer, a model,
or pivot their brand into fashion.
Pivot their brand into fashion. So this young man is actually working on that. And I fell in love with him. I met him. I didn't actually meet him. I met a friend of his at the FITM fashion show a few months ago.
Nice.
And his collection stood out for me.
Right.
You know, his collection was like walking art. His name is Kyle Denman, and I just can't wait to bring him into the studio and get an opportunity to talk to him, not just about his collection and the fact that he's so talented, but about all that goes along with the industry too.
Totally.
Yeah, because that's a pretty competitive industry to be in.
And it's such a hard industry to manage in terms of like margins, capital costs,
Yes,
all those things that we
definitely.
discuss, because it's, you end up a lot of times with having a bunch of inventory and then fashion trends change, and it takes a lot of investment for sure.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
your projections can't be off.
That's right.
Not only do you have to project from a monetary perspective, but you also have to know what's trending.
Exactly.
Because just because it's your idea doesn't mean it's a good one.
And
right?
it's changing so much. You get something, you get everything lined up with your product line, and then within 6 months, you're moving on a different season. You got to deal with the yearly changes and the seasonal adjustments.
Change.
So that's a huge part of it.
Yeah. So I'm looking forward to having him come in and our audience get to know him. We've got plenty of questions for him. So why don't we do that?
Sounds great.
All right. So we'll be right back with our guest, Mr. Kyle Denman. So we're back in the studio with our guest. I want to just give just a little intro. I think it's only fair that we let the audience know exactly who we have sitting with us today. And his name is Kyle Denman. He was the 2018 Young Fashion Designer of the Year and the grand prize winner of the Project Runway Remake It Work contest. I'm going to ask you about that too. How'd you get into it and all that? Now, this is the thing about you that struck me as being so phenomenal, is that you were a political science major in college.
I love that.
And you transitioned from political science to fashion. And so I want to know, what made you decide to do that? Because you graduated with honors, 2016. And so I'm sure that the job offers were coming in. So for you to choose to go from political science, which is so safe, to something like fashion really intrigues me. So let's get this party started.
Absolutely.
Right?
So I love, actually, that's really cool, because I'm a political science graduate as well from
way.
University of Redlands. That's
And he wound up into music.
And I did music and business, but I understand it's not exactly as safe as people think. So we'll get into that later. But tell us a little bit about yourself. So I know you've been all over. You mentioned we looked through your background in Ohio, Miami, LA, New York. Why don't you tell us where you're originally from? Where do you consider home to you?
Yeah, so I would consider Cincinnati, Ohio to be home.
Okay.
I was adopted from Seoul, South Korea when I was only 3 months old.
Wow.
Okay.
And then my family has lived in Cincinnati ever since.
Nice.
I've called Los Angeles home now, though, for the past about 2.5, almost 3 years. So I definitely consider LA, the city of angels, to be quite an amazing home.
Very cool.
That is
Very cool.
Now, what sparked your interest in political science?
So growing up, I've always been interested.
Okay.
I was in mock trial. I'm the former youth mayor of Cincinnati.
Love it.
Okay.
I wrote legislation. I would go to various conferences all over the country to talk about different issues that were important to me. So for me, when deciding on what to major in college, it was sort of just a natural idea, a natural inclination to say,
Right.
I want to study political science.
Okay.
I love it. When I was in college at Miami University in Oxford, Ohio, I was actually conducting undergraduate research on the political participation of the millennial generation.
Right.
I did research on all sorts of different things. The politics of disability, the politics of ageism through the Scripps Gerontology Center. So for me, it was just a very natural segue.
Right. So then, now, being a political science major, what made you decide to switch over to fashion? How'd that happen?
So it's an interesting story. So while I was conducting research with the Scripps Gerontology Center, I was basically testing the effectiveness of art on people who have dementia and Alzheimer's.
Nice.
Okay.
And we were able to conclude that art is so transformational. It's so powerful and profound on these people's lives, even at such a late stage in their lives.
Interesting.
So I thought to myself, you know what? This is something I need to do for the rest of my life. What is a type of art that exists in everyone's life on a daily basis?
Fashion.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so I quickly packed a suitcase and a backpack, flew out to Los Angeles on my own, and started my new career.
That's very cool.
That is very, very, very cool.
Thank
Very
you.
noble.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
Now,
what's up.
you're so multifaceted, and I don't want to leave anything out. So we're going to start with fashion, but you've got so much going on. Completely, like, I've seen, like, you have like 3 different major things going on right now, and I just want to make sure we touch on each of those things, okay?
course.
So now, what do you admire most about, like, fashion?
I would say what I admire most about fashion is that it is truly the first way a person is able to express him, her, or themselves.
Yes.
As humans, we automatically see fashion as a way to express who we are.
Totally.
It, in a way, is our second skin.
Absolutely.
And so
Definitely.
it's you know, I look at it, fashion is almost like tattoos for me.
It really is,
in a way,
right?
absolutely.
And so fashion, it's so encompassing. It really is art, design, movement, architecture,
Yes.
all rolled into one thing in both political and social cultures.
So
That's
when you
very
first
true.
when you first started thinking about fashion as something that you wanted to incorporate into your life, like who was somebody that you admired the most that you're like, this person was like, oh wow, like I need to go in this direction?
So I didn't really know of any designers before I had really entered the industry.
Okay.
But upon doing research after I moved out to Los Angeles, I have fallen in love with Cristobal Balenciaga, the
We love
father
our
of
Balenciaga.
avant-garde. Yeah,
course.
he is my
We love our
he is
Balenciaga.
my favorite fashion designer. And
That's what's up.
his story and his legacy is so incredible. And doing research, buying books, and going online to learn about him, he and I actually have very similar backgrounds. And so to be able to connect with a designer and a role model from decades ago
Yes.
was
Right.
incredibly important and essential in my growth as a designer.
Does it like connect to your personal style, or do you feel like there's a separation, like what your personal style is versus say who you admire in terms of design?
My personal style is definitely very different than what I like to design.
That's an interesting thing. I was curious about that.
Yeah.
Now, on your personal style, what is your personal style, would you say?
So a lot of my clothes are the same clothes that I would wear back when I was in political science. Usually a button front shirt, a nice pair of slacks, and usually I like to go for a really nice watch to catch people's attention.
Yeah,
Okay.
you gotta have the watch game.
Oh
Definitely.
Yeah,
Definitely.
we like that.
Now, on the side where you're designing fashion, what is your sweet spot, you would say?
I would say it's definitely transitioned. When I first started within this industry, I was designing these beautiful long gowns. I designed wedding dresses for people.
Right.
But then in my last fashion show, I've seen a very different side of me, which I've really fallen in love with, which is designing avant-garde clothes.
Nice.
So clothes that are very sculptural and they're very story-driven. So clothes that are able to make people think and feel, and clothes that are able to challenge the idea of what fashion truly is.
Okay. Now, what drove you to fit them?
So I was doing research on different fashion schools in order to learn. Before moving out to Los Angeles, I had no background in design.
Okay.
I had no idea how to sew or
Wow.
make clothing or anything. So I thought I was able to receive such an amazing undergraduate education at Miami. The teachers and the professors were very one-on-one and very personal.
Right.
Yes.
Is there another place for fashion that I'm able to receive that same sort of education and make those same relationships with my professors and instructors.
Cue the FITM plug.
And FITM,
Yeah, exactly.
and
Yeah.
FITM is that place.
Yeah, that's the
Yeah,
spot.
absolutely.
I was telling you earlier that my son went to FITM, and that was one of the things that impressed us about the school is that the professors there are so personable. And one of the things that I loved is that a lot of them have been in the industry, and a lot of them are still in the industry.
Yeah.
So it's that experience. Your teacher has actually been through what you are going through. And so you can sit down and talk with them, and it's like a mentorship on top of learning all the things you need to know. So that was a great choice.
Yeah, they've definitely not only invested in my future as a designer, but they've truly invested in my future as a person as well.
Yes.
That's what you want.
Great
Absolutely.
school. Now, the 2018 Young Fashion Designer of the Year. I want to know how you got introduced. How did that all take place?
So I actually had received an email from the person who's in charge of the whole organization, the Fashion Designer and Craft Makers Network of London.
Okay.
And she said, we're having a fashion show in New York in a couple of months. We would love for you to represent the United States in the Young Fashion Designer competition.
Perfect.
And so upon hearing that, I thought, there's no way I can pass up this opportunity.
Right.
And so it was a pretty easy connection to form. And the whole idea of the show itself was to create garments that were challenging to the ideas of fashion and that were inspired by the 1920s. So I immediately thought, well, what was relevant in the 1920s?
Right.
It was the Great Depression, the Roaring 20s, it was the Prohibition.
Right.
What do each of those three aspects of history and of politics have in common?
Now I'm seeing the connection, how the political
Right,
science
see?
background got you the style.
Right.
Absolutely.
And so I saw that there was this connection of alcohol. So I thought,
Right.
okay, what is a form of alcohol that was so prevalent in the 1920s? Champagne.
Right.
Which brings me to my award-winning dress.
Yes.
She is spilling her
She's
champagne
spilling
dress.
her
Got
champagne
it.
dress. That was a beautiful dress.
Thank you.
And it's so funny because in looking at the dress and knowing what the dress represented, you could see it.
Oh, thank you.
You could definitely see it. She spills her champagne. It was really a nice outfit. Now, when people always want to know, how do I get into the fashion industry?
Yeah.
How do I want to be a designer. I want to be a model. There's all these aspects of fashion that people are drawn to, right? And so from a design perspective, everyone thinks they're a fashion designer, So how do you actually get into fashion in the way that you did? Because now you're at a level where people are looking to you and asking your advice and how you get in. So I want to know from you, how did you maneuver getting into the industry at this level?
So I think with not only the fashion industry, but any creative industry, realistically, it's all about connections.
Yes.
But it's about making the right connections.
That's right.
100%.
First impressions are so important, I think, as we all understand.
That's right.
And making genuine and authentic relationships with people who are also good people.
Absolutely.
Right.
So for me, I was very fortunate that I had some connections already. I reached out to them. I was fortunate about the Project Runway Remake It Work experience.
Right.
I was fortunate with the Young Fashion Designer of the Year experience. And that just allowed me to continue to build my network of good people who are so well connected on their own within this industry, and to sort of maneuver myself that way.
Okay.
That's very
So
cool.
for a young person listening to this podcast who looks at you and they start Googling your name and they look you up and they see your Instagram and all of that, what would you say to them are 3 things they should do to get started?
The first thing I would say is take a chance. Reach out to those people that you're researching.
Absolutely.
That's exactly what I do. Social media is a huge component of that.
Definitely.
I receive direct messages all the time on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, through my website, everything, just asking for advice.
Right.
Yep.
Some people ask for internships, some people ask for dresses, but either way, it's just starting to make those connections. And that would be my first piece of advice.
Totally. No, I like that a lot. It's
I do
something
too.
we talk about that all the time on the show about how important it is to master social media and how, it's changing such where, people who can make you can basically make your own presence and your own brand
Right.
and grow it on your own. You talk a little bit about, in one of your interviews about metaphysics of fashion. Can you explain what is metaphysics of fashion to you and what did you mean by when you described it?
So in my mind, the metaphysics of fashion sort of indicate what is unseen through fashion.
Right.
Okay.
And a lot of that, in my opinion, is the way that fashion is able to affect people.
Right.
So there's even studies that are done on the different colors that we wear will affect our moods.
Yes.
So if you're maybe having a grumpy day in the morning, you put on a bright color, then your mood might change.
That's
The
very
fibers that actually affect your mood. It's really amazing to see of how fashion is truly integrated into all aspects of our lives.
Yeah.
Like I said before, fashion is the way that people are able to express themselves.
Definitely.
And so
Definitely.
I think to have that added layer of creativity and that added layer of us as people, I
Yes.
think is so important.
Yeah, I mean, I love
Absolutely.
that you talk on this connection of like the emotion and the psychology and fashion and style because I feel that way a lot too. Like getting myself a new outfit. You know what I mean? Sounds shallow, materialistic, but it changes my mindset.
Oh,
go,
yeah.
Go pick up a new outfit, new jacket, new shirt. You feel like a new guy. You know what I'm saying? So I like that a lot, and I think that's really cool and it's really fascinating what you were talking about earlier as far as the connection between people in their later stage. With Alzheimer's and
Yeah.
fashion. That's really interesting. So you found with that like people were improved, their cognitive functioning.
Their cognitive function, their physical movements. So a lot of the
Wow.
people with whom I worked who have Alzheimer's and dementia also have arthritis,
Right.
and their mobility is then put at a detriment. And so various things related to art were able to actually help them. And so that's when I really saw that fashion and art as a whole can be so transformational.
So pivot that into how you combine your passion, like political science and fashion. And, I find that interesting having a political science background too. Like I see your study of history has been obviously very fundamental in your design and your success. Why don't you tell our listeners a little bit more about that? Like how political science has inspired you, in your life?
Yeah, well, I think both political science and fashion are very similar in a way.
That's fascinating.
They are both so encompassing and they
Yes.
exist in our lives every day,
That's
every
very true.
minute,
Yeah,
no
especially
matter
these
what.
days.
No matter
right. And in a way, I think they relate not only because both fields are about networking,
Right.
but they also, like I said, exist in our lives on a daily basis. But for me, I've really been able to integrate the two because for the past several years, I've been working actually at a nonprofit called
Yes.
Freedom
Oh,
and
lovely.
Fashion.
Yeah,
Right.
we're going to talk about
Yeah.
that.
Absolutely.
We're definitely going to talk about that. Now, in fashion, I know a lot of people, they want to get into fashion and they don't realize, I think, until they get in the level of stress that can be connected with the competitiveness of it, because we're looking at it right on this side from the art perspective, but it's also very competitive. So how do you deal with the stress of the industry?
Like any industry that can be stressful, it really all boils down to remaining humble. Like I said, connecting with genuine people and forming authentic relationships,
Of course.
but making sure that you stay grounded and you never lose sight of who you are as a person and then also as a designer.
So this is tip number 2. If you're listening, he gave you tip number 1. That was tip number 2. And when we come back, we're going to hear about tip number 3.
Sounds good.
And we're back in the studio with Kyle Denman, and he's a fashion designer. And we're talking to him about the industry of fashion design. And where we left off at, we were talking about, some of the stress that's involved in that world. And so what do you do for self-care? Because there has to be a component where you just take care of yourself also. So what do you do for that?
Yeah, that's definitely a very difficult thing to balance
Right.
for, I think, anyone who is so passionate and so dedicated to their work.
That's true.
Absolutely.
So for me, when it comes to self-care, I definitely try and will take a day of a week and sit back and relax. I won't design, I won't email, I won't connect on my website with people until the following day. I will say,
Very
okay,
healthy.
this is my one day of rest. Let's say it's a Sunday. Take the afternoon off, maybe go on a hike, do something physical, get my spirits high,
Yeah.
go outside, go to the beach, hang out with some friends. But the traditional R&R techniques is sort of what I try and follow.
And so one of those things is to stay off social media for the day, not to really interact with people outside of the friends or family that you're engaged with at that time, so that you can have a truly relaxing day.
Right. A lot of times I'll journal,
Okay.
get my thoughts and feelings down. If I have some ideas for new designs, I'll write them down,
Right.
but then I'll get back to them the following day.
Of course.
I'll let those ideas sit in my mind a little bit and say, okay, I have them down. Let me get back to them tomorrow.
I really like how you mentioned earlier about this sort of correlation between anxiety and isolationism. And I think that that's a very important thing that we all, I think, deal with here, especially living in Los Angeles, which I feel I've always spoken about this as a very socially unsynergenic city. So I was wondering what you thought in terms of like, maybe you could elaborate more on, what you do as far as like, because I agree that like getting out of your comfort zone, pushing yourself more socially, meeting new people really does help with the low level, sort of your base level anxiety. Why don't you talk a little bit about that and like how that developed for you?
Yeah, so I'm definitely the type of person who really tries to push myself and push the people around me to get out of their comfort zones.
Yes.
Right.
So even if it's something like going to a restaurant or going to a bar and talking to new people who are sitting next to me and saying, hey, let's hang out. Like,
Very
let's
New
be
York
friends.
style of you, actually.
Very, yeah.
Yeah.
But that's actually how I've met some of my closest friends.
Totally.
In a relaxed environment where people aren't necessarily networking.
Right.
Right?
Right. And so for me, that's one of the biggest components that I take away
Yeah.
from it is really just trying to be intentional with the relationships that I form. And to me, that's really helped me overcome any sort of anxiety and really step outside of my comfort zone.
Right.
Which then hopefully in turn helps my friends and my acquaintances get out of their own comfort zones.
Yes.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, it is. Because I think that, a lot of times when we think about networking and we think about, expanding, the network of people that we know, you do feel anxious. But if you do it in an organic way, where you're just sitting down talking to people, you go into a bar, you go into a restaurant, you go into, a clothing store, whatever it is that you do, you just start talking to people.
Absolutely.
Right? Because you'd be surprised. People, like DJ Bander said, we're all in our own little world. And so when you come out of that, just smiling and saying hello to someone can strike up a conversation.
To change your whole life.
Absolutely.
To change your whole life. I love that. So that was tip number 3 if you guys were listening.
pay attention.
Right? Pay attention.
One quick
Yes, that
follow-up
was
question
3.
that I had for you. I was really curious about, because as a music composer, like I'm always fascinated by creative inspiration because it's the idea of manifesting something from nothing, right?
Yes.
Right.
So it's almost the most forward-thinking part of the human mind. And I was curious, is like for you in terms of your fashion, like where does that spark come from for you? What's the inspiration for your collection?
So for all of the work that I do, I like to tell a story.
Okay.
Okay.
It could be a story that is deep and personal and very emotional, or it could be a story that is completely the opposite. But
Right.
no matter what, I want to tell a story.
Right.
Because you never know how that story will resonate with at least one other person.
Yes.
And chances are that story will resonate with a whole network of people. And so for me, I like to do a lot of research. Again, my political science background coming in, I love doing the research.
Yeah.
I love learning about new things. But I like to tell a story and I like to challenge people's ideas. So for one mini collection that I did a couple of years ago, I actually was inspired by the orchid. The orchid in its purest form is all white. But at that point, that's also when it's the most mature, which sort of creates this disconnection, if you will, about what is pure and what is mature. And I compared the life cycle of the orchid actually to the life cycle of humans.
Wow.
Because in a sense, orchids are a living paradox. Just
Right.
like in a way, we as humans are living
They're at their
paradoxes.
most beautiful form at their frailest.
Right.
Right.
Exactly. And so I compared the two, and I really wanted to challenge people's ideas of what is beautiful.
Like the inverse of LA society.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's so cool. Now, with your designs, I know that 12 is the magic number.
Right.
So how long did it take you with your FITM fashion show? How long did it take you to come up with the 12 pieces? And please tell us what your thought was and what your theme was, because I was attracted to you because of the theme. So tell us that.
Yeah. So for the FITM Advanced Study Fashion Design program, I came up with a collection that took a total of 9 months. And that was the length of the entire program.
Yes.
So my inspiration behind this collection was actually Cristobal Balenciaga. I wanted to create a collection that was different, that was unique, that was challenging to people,
Right.
and that would really challenge people's ideas of what is fashion.
Totally.
I wanted to draw people into my story, and I really wanted to create a collection that would be walking art.
Yes.
I called my collection Broken Angel, Fallen from Grace. It was actually inspired by Cristobal Balenciaga's relationship with the Catholic Church and his upbringing as a gay man,
Yes.
which is a relationship with which I actually very closely identify.
Right.
So I wanted to create this really unique collection that I would call avant-garde, dramatic, and heartbreakingly honest.
It was beautiful. Yeah.
Thank you.
Nice.
It was literally walking art.
Thank you.
And so it took 9 months to create it.
It did.
Wow, that's amazing. And then your inspiration for it, you said it ties into who you are as a person,
Exactly.
right? So that made it more exciting for you.
Yeah. It really felt as if I was putting myself on the runway.
That's cool.
I was really showing a piece of myself and who I am as a person, as well as a designer, to the entire audience.
Well, that's the goal. I think that is always how you make the most impactful art, whether it's music or fashion or anything or film. I think when you truly drop all fear of rejection and just go with pure self-expression, I think that resonates the most, you know, and I think that's great. I think it's because too many people are worrying about trend, worrying about what's going to fit into and being relevant, but we create new relevancy all the time
Right.
in our new work.
Right.
So,
Now that brings up a topic because when you create your own line, do you go with what's trendy,
Right.
or do you go with what you feel would give a message? What are you going to do when you create your own line? How's that going to work?
Yeah, so there's definitely a balance.
Okay.
So typically when I work with private clientele and do custom garments or outfits, it's all in the hands of the client.
Right.
What does that person want? I want to make sure that person feels beautiful or feels good or feels comfortable in what they're wearing.
Okay.
When it comes with creating a full collection, especially for a runway,
Right.
you want to make a statement.
Right.
You want it to be exciting. And then from there, you can draw upon different aspects of your collection and maybe minimize it or make it even more extravagant to whatever your clients want and to whatever your market would want.
Yes.
I like
So
that
there's
a lot.
definitely a fine line. But for the FITM runway show, I was really thinking, let me make this a show. Let me make a statement.
Right.
Let me make a collection that would be able to make the audience think.
Absolutely. I like that a lot. And one thing I also thought was really fascinating about you is you have this, you know, you seem also very passionate about your, you know, your humanity and what you
Yes.
want to do for the world and for women. Could you maybe tell us a little bit about how you got involved with the freedom in fashion movement, you know, and maybe you can extrapolate on, you know, one thing I find really interesting is that it's so positive for brands when they are attached to something like that, such a just moral cause. Why don't you elaborate a little bit on that and how that you got involved in that?
Yeah, absolutely. So Freedom in Fashion is a nonprofit based actually in Los Angeles. And at Freedom in Fashion, we utilize the arts of beauty, fashion, and styling to empower and educate at-risk youth, particularly young women who are survivors of human and sex trafficking, homelessness, drug and substance abuse, sexual assault, incarceration, gang violence, abandonment, and other forms of injustice and trauma. So I've been fortunate that I've been working with the organization for several years now, for about 2 years, and I am actually teaching these high school girls, and I am teaching them beauty and fashion and styling, so they not only learn the technical skills, but then I go further with them. I split the class in 2 segments, one on the actual technical skills, and the other half being on what I like to call transferable skills.
Interesting.
I teach them about vulnerability and self-esteem, empathy versus sympathy, connecting with people. I have them journal and write creatively. I have them design. And then we turn those designs into actual garments.
Sounds like I needed that class back in the day.
Okay.
Right? So like, what happened?
We might sit in on your
I
class.
was doing Chemistry 101 over here. You know what I'm saying? I like that.
That's really good. And we were talking outside. You were saying how fashion related to trauma, how it helps. It can actually reprogram the brain. So I really want you to talk about that a little bit too.
Yeah, so fashion, like any form of art, can be used as a form of therapy. And that's exactly what we at Freedom in Fashion use in terms of helping our students heal.
Nice.
So we use fashion essentially as a vehicle for this healing and for overcoming any sort of trauma.
Great. So what made you decide to get involved in women's causes?
I think it's so important for everyone to get involved in a specific cause that they absolutely love.
Right.
And for me, I was so fortunate because when I moved out to Los Angeles, my whole goal was to use art and fashion as a means of changing people's lives.
Right.
And then Freedom in Fashion came into my life, and I thought to myself, this is exactly what I wanted. This is exactly what I was looking for. And I wasn't sure how at first I was going to use fashion and art to change people's lives. But it just turned out that I was working predominantly with young women with whom I have become so close. I absolutely love them. They are my students, but they're more than that. They are my friends. They are become my family. And to be able to say that I've helped them grow even a little bit, whether it be as a designer or as a human, really means so much to me.
One quick thing I wanted to ask you is, a lot of our listeners are young entrepreneurs, and some come from supportive families, some don't. Some have supportive networks that believe in their dreams, and some don't. So I was curious for you. You've had a lot of the success. Like, did you get the support growing up that you wanted to get? Did you wish you had more? And what's the thing you might tell our listeners that maybe they don't come from a supportive environment? Their parents aren't behind their entrepreneurial, dreams and aspirations. What would you say to them?
Yeah, so I've been really fortunate in the sense that I have had a lot of support. Really, my family, my friends, and even my professors and teachers and my mentors throughout life have been with me every step of the way. I have connected again with some of my teachers from elementary school years and years ago because they have never lost sight of who I am as their student, and they've never lost sight of my potential. So my advice to anyone listening would be, if you don't have a supportive network, go find it. One of my favorite quotes is, effort beats talent every time.
Always.
Yes, always.
And if you put in the effort in whatever you want to do, you will get there.
Yep.
That's a great point. That is a great point. I think that's the biggest point of today, is that when you put the effort in, the opportunity will show up.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So even if you don't have a supportive family or supportive friends, the effort that you put in to creating that situation will give you the reward you're looking for. And I love that you said, create a network, and so I hope our listeners are really following the tips that he's giving us today, because I think they're not just tips for success in business, they're also tips in life.
Absolutely.
How to create, even if you're not born with a family, you can create a family. And sometimes that makes it even more interesting because you're aligning yourself with people who are supportive to you and who are of like mind. So there isn't this push back, there's this push forward.
Absolutely.
Right.
And
So-
and starting with that yes mentality,
Yes.
not the no mentality.
Exactly.
I preach that a lot. Like, your day is going to be as successful as you want it to be.
Absolutely.
If you get up with that attitude, like nothing's going to pan out for me today, well, it won't. And I just think you bring a nice energy. I like meeting people who seem to look at opportunities as something that they can reach for, not like, oh, are they there or are they not?
Right.
And I think that's a big important thing. So awesome. Kudos to you for that.
Thank you.
Exactly. Well,
Yeah.
Kyle, we are going to take a station break
We are.
right here, and we'll come back, and we want to know about what you see happening in your future, your near future, in the next 5 years. We've got a lot more questions for you. So I'm Charlene,
And I am DJ Bander.
and we're on Dash Talk
Talk
X,
X.
and we'll be right back. And we are back in the studio with Kyle Denman, our fashion designer, young fashion designer. And so in this segment, I really want to know, like, what do you see as your next steps in your future? What's next for you?
Yeah, so I've been pretty fortunate in the sense that I like to be very flexible. I don't necessarily have any hard specific goals of working for a specific label or working for a specific brand or company because I want to keep my options open.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think that is also really important within this and any industry.
Yes.
Is to be open-minded to all opportunities.
Yes.
You got to be.
Yeah, any opportunity is an opportunity, whether good or bad, in which a person can grow. So for me, for my immediate future, I really just want to keep working on my own clothing.
Yes.
I've developed a fairly nice following just based on all of my past experiences. And I just want to take every chance to learn within this industry. Being so new to it from political science,
Right.
there's still so much for me to learn. And there are so many people out in the industry who are able to teach me.
Right.
Yes.
So I really want to take advantage of that and to take advantage of any opportunity in which I can grow as a designer.
I like that. We
That's
we talk
cool.
about that a lot with with entrepreneurs. Is that it's been the same way with my own career. Is like the way to get a success in a lane is to kind of be open to the universe handing you something new that you didn't quite expect.
Yeah.
Right.
And I like that. As a young person, I studied judo, and judo's translation is the flexible way.
Right.
And so I like when you said that because it's very true that like people who are really successful are like, okay, nothing is going to go exactly the way you
That's right.
originally
Absolutely.
intended.
It
And
never
the,
does.
the people who grow are people who just adjust to the new circumstances and look at them as blessings and opportunities, not as setbacks or like, oh, like it didn't work out exactly how I wanted it to. you know?
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you found that a lot, obviously, as you transitioned, right, over from political science into fashion.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I also just want to keep teaching.
Yes.
Right.
I have been able to grow my classroom of Freedmen Fashion Girls from 9 last year to 23 in just
Wow.
1 year.
That's amazing.
And these girls mean the absolute world to me. And so I want to remain a part of their lives for
Yes.
as long as I possibly can.
Yes. Now, do you see yourself, building your own brand?
Yeah, I definitely do. Whether it be big or small, I've been fortunate because I'm able to develop some clientele through social media, through my website.
Right.
Social media is truly a universalizing factor.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
And it makes everyone's network that much more accessible. And so I've been able to make a lot of really great connections, and I've been able to meet a lot of really amazing clients and people through a simple message on Instagram or on Facebook or on Twitter.
Yeah.
So I'm very fortunate.
Well, I want to stop, put a pause, put a pin in it right there, because what that translates to is that you are able to build a business using social media as your platform and create income from that.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And create clients who are attracted to the type of fashion that you design, and they want your style of fashion in their lives. And so that translates into dollars and cents. And so for our listening audience, I want you to know that you don't need a brick and mortar business.
Right.
You don't need to go somewhere in the morning at 9 and leave there at 5 to say you are a designer. You just need to start designing and put your stuff out there, is what I hear you saying.
Absolutely.
Right? And social media will be a way that it can help you that can be your store.
Right. especially something like Instagram, which is so visually appealing
Yes.
to people. For an industry like fashion, it is so amazing to use and to utilize.
Oh yeah, because when I'm looking at different designers on social media, you'll see a dress or a pantsuit or whatever as a woman, that appeals to you, and you're like, I want that in my life. How can I get it? And to be able to go on social media and message you and say, I love that dress. Would you make one for me? Starts a conversation. And so I just want our fashion designers out there to really hear this, is that you don't need a brick and mortar store. You can literally set yourself up to start a business online using social media. And of course you need to take classes. And of course you need to do the things that are going to make you stand out as a designer.
Right.
But I think that one of the messages that I hear Kyle saying is that he has created a stream of income using social media, and it is allowing him to use his talent to live.
Well, and especially I would think,
Yeah.
Fashion being that it's so visual, I could see how Instagram is like a great centerpiece for
yeah.
you, in that sense. And
Yeah.
I also noticed a lot when I was researching your brand, you use a lot of visual cohesiveness in terms of like how you post, like everything is very structured, and I'm like really into that myself. And I was just curious, is of all the social media platforms, would you say Instagram is the one that for right now is like the most active for you in terms of what you do?
Yeah, it definitely is.
Yeah, that's what I would suspect, right? Yeah.
That's-
And you have a Facebook, Twitter following as well?
I do, yeah. But Instagram for me is by far the most influential.
Because people want to comment
Right.
Oh,
and
yeah.
engage each other around pieces. I noticed that especially with fashion. It's something like everybody's got an opinion on it.
Right.
Exactly.
Music's great in that sense too, but fashion too. It's like everybody, when they like a dress or they like some pants, they like a suit, they got to put in their 2 cents, right?
Right.
Oh, yeah.
And that increases engagement.
Absolutely.
So that's really cool. And like for you, did the Instagram promotion, did it kind of just develop on its own from just posting? Or did you get some big boost somewhere? Some people get a lot of followings by getting promoted by somebody big, where would you say like a big chunk of your following comes from?
Yeah, so a lot of my following came from after the Project Runway experience. So I was the grand prize winner of the Remake at Work contest
Yeah.
back
Wonderful.
in 2016.
Exactly.
And that was a separate competition that was all done online. But then during the actual show,
Yes.
they would post my work.
Right.
Right.
And so all of the viewers of the show would then see
Then see.
all of my work.
Yeah.
And then they would look me up and they would research me, follow me on social media.
Yeah.
And that was how my following really first started.
Yeah. Well, that's very cool.
That is cool. So I'm going to ask a question that is very important to me. What are the color trends for next year, would you say?
Oh, you know?
And so-
Charlie staying one step ahead over
I
here.
want to, I want to be ahead of the curve.
Yeah, so just as an introduction, if for anyone, whoever wants to do some trend forecasting, go online, do your research on WGSN or
See?
WWD, do your research. But for me, I always like to tell an audience, especially my students, that the trend is whatever is going to make you feel comfortable.
like that.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yes.
You're the trend.
Yeah,
You are the
exactly.
trend.
You set the trends, right?
That's right.
Totally.
I'm telling you, that's what I do. I set my own trend. So I'm glad you agree.
Absolutely.
Straight up.
Find what works for you
Exactly.
and do it.
Exactly.
Yeah. And put that collaboration of different styles together.
Oh,
you know?
yeah.
I think that's really cool to do as well.
Right. Now, I know your heart is freedom and fashion.
Yes.
And so I really want our audience to know how they can participate in supporting that organization. I went online and I did some research, and, trafficking of young children is prevalent. I mean,
Very.
it's terrible. And for this organization to be about, putting them back together and putting them in a space where they're not broken, anymore, and you teaching, fashion and how that can heal them, I think is amazing. But I think people should understand that trafficking starts with kids as young as 10 and 12 years old. Nearly 60,000 children are reported to be abused or neglected each week, with an estimate of
Crazy.
900,000 confirmation of violence every year. 900,000. As many as 20,000 kids are forced into prostitution by human trafficking. 1 in 3 people are solicited for sex within 48 hours, young people within 48 hours of running away from home. So they're running from a bad situation into a worse situation or the same situation. So trafficking of human life is today outrageous. I don't know if it's because of social, of the way that we can connect so easily, but because of social media, we should be able to do something about it, And so I really want your cause to get the type of attention that it should get, and I want our listeners, if they want to get involved at any level, to be able to know how they can do that.
Absolutely. Yeah. When I was doing research with Freedom in Fashion, I learned that human trafficking is actually the second most lucrative form of organized crime in the entire world.
Yes.
A lot of it comes down to global wealth inequality,
right?
Which is why you see it in third world countries so much.
Absolutely,
it's such fast, quick money for these guys.
Oh yeah, and it's sad to think that it's also happening here in the United States, in Los Angeles.
It's domestic.
Oh, the
all
three
around
biggest
us.
places are Miami, I think Los Angeles, and San Francisco.
That sounds about right. It's all over, which is so heartbreaking.
Right. So tell us how people can donate.
Yeah. So people can very easily donate money or their time to our cause.
Okay.
People can just go onto our website or onto our social media and then contact us. But on our website, there is actually a tab that says volunteer.
Yes.
People can just fill out their information very quickly and we will get back to you. We always, always, always need volunteers.
Yes.
Whether that be with driving to field trips. I take the girls all the time to museums to get them out of the classroom and to really engage with them in the real world. Or we need people to help with styling for our fashion shows that we have every year.
That's cool.
Every year, Freedom in Fashion has a fashion show. And this is work that is designed and created by our students.
Wow.
So, for example, last year, our girls came up with a theme called Descent. And our fashion show was actually inspired by the Marianas Trench, the deepest part of the world's ocean. Because the girls actually researched and they saw that there, beauty forms under an immense amount of pressure.
I love it.
Just like beauty in their lives have formed under an immense amount of pressure.
Wow.
You can imagine me as their teacher just going crazy over this theme that they came up with.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
It was beautiful. But we always need volunteers at the fashion show to help with organization, with all sorts of different things. And then also on our website, there's a donate tab.
Okay.
Money helps us so much, whether it be with getting venues, whether it be with getting transportation or getting supplies for these girls. So many of them don't have the art supplies or even
to even get started.
Right, or even the clothing that most other
course.
people have.
Wow.
So $100 can even go for such a long way. It can buy a couple girls some pairs of shoes.
That's very true. And it's freedomandfashion.org.
That's correct.
freedomandfashion.org.
Go check it out, guys.
Please check it out. And we want to know before we wrap, how do we get in contact with you? How do we keep following you? Because I'm plugged in, but everyone would love to be. Let's get your social media out there.
So all of my social media is consistent. And that is another piece of advice that I would have for any blossoming entrepreneur.
Yes.
Make sure your branding is always consistent.
Yep.
Yes.
Because it makes it easier for your following.
Yes.
So all of my social media and even my website, it's all my name, Kyle Denman, KyleDenman 13. So feel free to follow me, see what I'm up to. Feel free to message me and ask for any other tips.
Yes.
I love to connect with people.
We'll be hitting you up later for sure.
Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely. Well, you know what, Kyle? This has been amazing. I was so looking forward to you being here.
Oh, thank you.
And I want you to promise us you'll come back.
Absolutely.
And let us know how you're doing and what you're up to.
Thank you. I would love to.
Great. Well, that wraps for this show. I think this was a great one. What do you think, DJ Bander?
I thought it was great, Charline.
Absolutely. And we want to thank you for listening to this show. And this is Lunch with the Finance Bunch on Dash Talk
Talk
X.
X.
And we'll see you every Tuesday at noon.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you press that subscribe button. And remember, we are on SoundCloud and anywhere podcasts are found as the Finance Bunch. And find us every Tuesday at noon on Dash Radio on station Dash Talk X. See you soon.